Hello everyone, and welcome to our debate today, which is in conjunction with animal research, understandinganimalresearch.org.uk and idebate.org. The motion that we'll be debating today is this House will ban all forms of animal research. Now, just to introduce everyone, the people for the motion is James Bishop, who's a fourth year doing environmental science, Alistair Evanson, who's a first year doing PPE, and Michael Wilson, who's a second year doing politics. And then those who are going against the motion is Jenny Lester, a third year politics, Ross Stephen, a first year doing
English history and teaching.
Yeah, English history and teaching, and then Joseph Dean's doing first year politics. Each person will be speaking for 5 minutes. And who's introducing? Who's doing the first talk? Michael, who's talking first out of this group? Myself.
We're in
order. We're in order. And then so both of them will do a 5 minute introduction onto their team, and then everyone else will do 5 minutes. So as always, the people for the motion shall go first. So Michael, if you could talk, please.
Would you like me to stand up?
Yes, stand up, please. Stand up.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I believe that all forms of animal research, etc., testing, should be banned. I'm against animal testing on both moral and actually scientific grounds. Morally, animal testing is extremely cruel and also completely unnecessary. An example, I once saw some undercover footage from a laboratory in which dogs were force-fed weed killer to see how toxic the weed killer was. However, it had already been tested on humans, and the dogs were being given 50 times what had been established as a dangerous dose for humans. What possible reason could they have for doing this? And that example occurs countless times across the whole of animal testing. It is nothing short of torture, just like pouring shampoo into an animal's eyes just to see what happens, or infecting it with horrific diseases like cancer just to see if a potential cure works. I find these sorts of things utterly repugnant. Scientifically, testing products meant for humans on animals is unreliable and potentially dangerous. Animals react differently to humans to many substances, rendering many of these tests utterly pointless and absurd. For example, a contraceptive called, I think it's tamoxifen is how you pronounce it, was once developed, which was tested on rats. It worked as intended and was given to humans. However, it had the opposite effect on women, which actually increased their fertility, which sort of wasn't supposed to happen. There are many other examples, some of which had much more harmful consequences. You may remember thalidomide, a drug given to pregnant women to prevent morning sickness. It had been tested on animals and declared safe for humans, but it caused severe deformities in many of the babies born after their mothers had taken it. A couple of years ago, a drug called TGN-1412 was tested on some human volunteers and very nearly killed them. They were on life support for some time and were left with permanent health problems. Prior to being given to these people, this drug had already been tested on monkeys at a dose 500 times stronger than that which was given to the humans, without causing the monkeys any ill effects. Aspirin causes birth defects in cats. Penicillin causes kills guinea pigs. 6-ozoridine, a cancer drug which can be used in humans for long periods, will kill dogs in a few days in very small doses. The list goes on. My personal view is that products meant for humans should be tested on humans. It's the only way to know if they work as intended, and we have the choice of whether or not to volunteer for testing. Animals are given no choice. They're simply used and discarded and killed like objects. They have as much right to live as we do, and the right to live that life free of pain and misery. As Jeremy Bentham, a noted philosopher, put it, the central question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? And obviously they can. Our greater intelligence gives us a responsibility to protect other species, not the right to use and abuse them in a way that we see fit. That should be abhorrent to any sentient, compassionate human being. And that's why I believe animal testing should be banned. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd actually like to begin just by giving a slight sense of the scale of animal testing. The UK consumes over 300 times more fish per year than the total number of animals used in research. And 97% of that research is done on the least sentient animals, such as mice, rats, fish, and small birds. I would like to rebut the statement made that it doesn't always work on, like animals and humans do have different physiologies. However, I'd argue that if we don't test it, if we test it and it kills the animals, well, then we're proving our point. If it's not safe for them, there's a high chance it's not going to be safe for humans either. If we don't have death or damage, we don't have proof, unfortunately. And the point made about human testing, you say it's voluntary. Yeah, voluntary, but let's face it, if you are in such a desperate financial situation, if you're in such a desperate situation, full stop, that you would actually go and test a drug that's going to damage or kill you, is it really voluntary, or is it caused by your environment and the situations you're facing? I don't really think it is. Almost every Nobel laureate in physiology or medicine since 1901 has used animal research in some way or other. Insulin, anaesthetics, penicillin, and tetanus, blood transfusions, kidney and heart transplants, as well as replacement surgeries were perfected on animals. Herceptin, another one, is used to cure cancer, tested on animals. CT and MRI, animals. Interesting point, many animals suffer from the same diseases as humans, such as cancers, TB, flu, and asthma. Thus, research may be beneficial for them as well. Not saying it always will be, but maybe. I have a question for the proposition. Would you refuse drugs that have been tested on animals if you needed them? Simple question. Would you refuse to give animals drugs that were tested on humans if they needed them? Just a thing to think about. I'd also like to ask, the incident you pointed out, where did that happen? The one with the animals being tested after humans had been tested. Where did that happen? Because in UK it's illegal. As is use of great apes full stop, use of lesser primates is illegal. If you have tested it on anything else, if you've not tested it on everything else, and there's no suitable non-animal alternative, all research needs to be approved by the Home Office. I think, honestly, it's for the greater good, and it's not nice, it's not fun, but at the end of the day, we need to test it on something, and cell research is not there yet.
Right, well, I'm grateful for the points you raised there, and I'll come round to talking about some of them in a minute. First of all, though, I'd like to bring up a campaign which exists to campaign along similar lines to that we're advocating today, called Safer Medicines. It's a UK-based organisation that has as its patrons Caroline Lucas MP, one of the better-known MPs in the House of Commons, Tony Benn, who's a former Minister of Technology and is also rather well known, and also the actor Matt Fraser, who's a thalidomide victim. And they have support from a wide section of the scientific community, and their campaign isn't based around animal ethics as such, because I'm quite sure that your motives for arguing against us are not that you have no heart and are quite willing to see animals suffer, but that you value human life above animal lives, and that if drugs can be perfected on animals that save human lives, and that's important. And I'm not going to get into a debate about whether human lives are important. What I would point out is that if we want to save human lives, animal testing is not the way to go. According to Peter, 92% of drugs that are proved safe on animals fail human tests, which is perhaps rather telling, because that means that you've essentially got 8% of drugs that come out of animal tests are successful. Now, when we compare alternative methods, and at the moment there's computer simulations and testing on individual parts of the human body in controlled situations with stem cell research, but also test tube cells. Trials of new drugs were carried out in Croatia by GlaxoSmithKline using these methods, and they had a 52% success rate when they were tested on live human subjects. That's a step up from 8% to 52% success rate. That's perhaps rather telling. Now, 52% you might say, yes, is little better than chance, but 8%, it's pretty small. And to underline this, a former senior vice president of GlaxoSmithKline, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, said, if we had the choice, GlaxoSmithKline would probably stop testing on animals completely. Well, maybe in a handful of cases, but certainly a massive reduction on what we do now, because it's quite simply not cost effective and not accurate. The reason why animal testing continues in the UK is that every drug sold in the UK must be tested on animals before it goes on sale, under a UK law from the 50s, which, as with many laws, technology has overtaken it. And that leads quite nicely into your question about whether I would refuse drugs that have been tested on animals. Well, as I have had drugs before, have had medicines before, I have taken medicines which have been tested on animals. And that doesn't sit well with me. And the fact that that animal testing is not scientifically necessary is perhaps rubbing salt in the wounds for those of us that object. I would be interested to know how many of your noble laureates actively support animal testing, or, like the senior vice president of GlaxoSmithKline, do it anyway, but would rather they didn't have to. And on the subject of penicillin, because it was obviously being researched in wartime by Florian Jay, the initial tests, the initial serious tests when they finally produced enough penicillin to go ahead, was done on victims of, I believe, from memory, a dog bite, who it proved effective on because they had enough penicillin and a chance of treating them. And penicillin was first trialled against microbes in petri dishes rather than on animals. Now, you also mentioned quite close to the start of your piece about animals, certain animals being the animals used, let me get that right, being the least sentient. What do you mean by that? What that seems to be to me is that you value the, oh dear, I've got a double clap now, is that you value some animals and some lives and you feel that some pain is less significant than others. Now, if we're going to start placing value on certain lives, I think you need to think very carefully about the philosophical arguments behind that. Thank you very much.
Ross, would like to? Oh no, just sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to, if it's okay, begin with some rebuttal. Now, I'm not a philosophy student, and I'm aware that the rebuttal I'm making is to a philosophy student. But he said, get interested in philosophy ideas, and that's what our conflict is. And we agree it totally is, because essentially that's what's happening between the two sides in this debate. We're coming at it from a utilitarian point of view. It's for the greater good, it saves more lives than it costs, and essentially in the long term, it has many more benefits than the short-term negatives are. That's essentially what we believe. The ideas come from who tend to be quite along the Kantian line of preservation of autonomous beings. We don't have the right to take away from them and all this. But what I'm going to try and do my rebuttal very quickly is just explain why utilitarianism is more relevant to this debate and why utilitarianism is a better basis for our life, and especially in scientific terms, ladies and gentlemen. Because you said we were valuing lives differently. We were saying the life of an animal isn't as important as the life of a human. And ladies and gentlemen, that's not necessarily what we're saying, but we're saying the lives of a very small number of animals, especially when you compare it to the other amount of animals that we kill if you look at food consumption and stuff like that. Actually quite a small amount of animals to save a large amount of humans and often a large amount of animals as well. We don't have a problem with that. We think that actually, in the long term, that benefits humanity, that benefits the animals, it just benefits life in general, so we have no objection to it. And yes, that is a philosophical point, but we don't see why that makes it irrelevant at all. He always talked about GlaxoSmithKline, and how GlaxoSmithKline said we wouldn't use animal testing if we didn't have to. I'm not going to accuse GlaxoSmithKline's chairman of being a liar. It's an evil company, not because it does animal testing, it's an evil company for lots of different reasons, including some of its animal welfare stuff, which isn't actually related to its testing. But I wouldn't put it past him to make a statement like that regarding PR when in an interview that he does actually do a lot of interviews with green environmental groups, especially because the environmental record is even worse than the animal welfare record. and the animal welfare groups. So actually, I'm not entirely convinced that what he said in one interview is the best way to base his company's policy. I'd also like to talk about, we talked about single organs and how we can test on single organs, and GlaxoSmithKline have done this once. Yeah, that's great. There's actually a Scottish doctor, a good man named Dr. Lester, who does fun stem cell studies, and basically that testing is completely irrelevant because the issue is that doctors can sort of guess what's going to happen to an organ. That's why they formulated it with those chemicals. That's why they've done it like that. What they're not sure of is how it's going to affect other organs. That's where the danger is. Essentially, this is more dangerous because it makes you think it's safe because it does what you wanted it to do to your heart. Meanwhile, it kills your lungs or whatever, like something like that. So we think that actually that's an unsafe method, and so it's like totally irrelevant to this debate. So I'm going to move on to like 2 main points. First of all, why it's necessary, despite what the first 2 speakers have said on the other side. And secondly, why there is actually no viable alternative, so why we have to keep it basically. So first of all, to the necessity. I'm actually going to use exactly the same drug that was used by the first proposition speaker to keep it nice and simple, but I can't pronounce its name. Thalidomide, that's the one. Okay, so thalidomide was tested on animals. It was then given to pregnant women, and it basically had negative effects on them. There's lots of stuff about babies that were born and having birth defects and things like that. And yes, that's accurate. However, what's interesting is what happened after this. Is a group of scientists took it back to animal testing, and they did the animal testing the correct way, the way that the law said they should have done it originally, but they didn't think it had been done that way. And they found out it would have failed the test, ladies and gentlemen. So actually what we find is that thalidomide is a dangerous drug, but what happened was the company that were doing the testing were put under pressure by animal rights groups to stop doing the testing, so it all sort of collapsed and they weren't passed properly through this test. So actually that's an example of where animal testing, if it had been done right, would have helped to save lives, would have helped to, wouldn't have done this damage. We actually think, if anything, it's a point for our side. So we thank you for bringing it up, although it's totally irrelevant to your case. Yeah, so like that's like one example why it's necessary, but essentially it's a lot of drugs like this, and there's a lot of benefits of that, and it's also because we think in the long term it saves lives, and we are prioritising some lives over other lives, but we're doing this as a strictly numerical thing. We're totally heartless. We don't care about how cute the cats are. We just want more cats. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. So that's what the moral way to look at. So now on to the last point. Why there is no viable alternative. So stem cell research is a viable alternative. Hooray. Unfortunately, that will be me speaking in the year 2075, by which it might actually be one. Because at the moment, it simply isn't. The same Dr. Lester, who I quoted earlier, said that we're about 45 years away from stem cell research being a viable alternative when it comes to testing for products. But because inherently it's not, because of this problem of creating one organ and then you don't know how it's going to react to the other organs, and also because scientifically we don't know how accurate the cloning processes are, how accurate the growing processes are. So essentially, it just doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. So what I've shown you is that animal testing is still necessary. There are no viable alternatives to it, and I've shown that we, as a side in this debate, are totally heartless and we're really evil, but we're still philosophically right. Thank you.
May conclude your side's argument.
I've been told to bring up on a couple of points, including the thalidomide is actually safe in mice, contrary to what you said, and also the GSK quote my colleague mentioned before, remember, colleague, whatever you wish, blonde person, it was said to a health select committee at the House of Commons, not trying to pick up his own company. Right, to my argument. I've got 2 main problems with animal testing in general. Is, well, a lot of people feel, we don't feel good about it. No one likes animal testing. It's something that anyone who sees any video of even the slightest animal testing, whether it be shampoo or anything of the products that we probably have in this room, we feel uncomfortable watching. There's a big reason for that, because naturally it's not a very nice thing to see. It causes distress to the animals, more than for physical harm. Depression and mental problems are resulting from these tests, and this is on a massive scale. Unlike what they've trivialised it as less when we eat fish, it's actually quite big. 12,000 to 15,000 monkeys are imported to the US every year for animal testing alone. They're monkeys. Other non-human primates, 70,000 of which are used in the US and the EU every year. Now, in the UK, this is divided into 3 or 4 categories of use. Mild, moderate, substantial, and unclassified. Unclassified is when the animal dies without no one knowing if it died in pain. Mild is mild discomfort, moderate discomfort, substantial. I don't have to go into that. 39% of testing in UK is mild, 55% is moderate, and luckily a small percentage, but still scarily high, is 2% in the UK is substantial harm to animals. It's quite a scary thought when I don't particularly see myself as a philosopher or anyone who has any information about this. I don't profess to have any kind of degree in the matter, but I see an intrinsic value of life, no matter what it is. It's not because I'm a hippie, it's not because of anything else, it's because anyone who's ever seen an animal, whatever animal, will know, no matter how sentient it is, can feel pain, can feel some degree of emotion. I don't know, not even the best scientists in the world who have studied it for over decades of their lives know how much of a dog can feel pain. No one can say that their lives are less important than ours. No one will ever come to the fact saying these people are not, these animals, sorry, that's a bit of a slip, but anyway, these animals are less important or they do not suffer. And if they state that, they're lying a little bit. Even if in the best countries in the world with the rules to supervise animal testing, it still goes wrong regularly. And unfortunately, animals do suffer. But my main point, I'll bring it back to science, is that, as my colleague mentioned, 9 out of 10 of the way it passes an animal, times when it passes an animal testing case, it actually fails the next few tests. It's okay. It fails future further tests. 9 out of 10, or as my colleague said, 8% pass. That's quite a lot. And unlike what they claim, there are quite a lot of alternatives. In vitro test tube methods, computerized virtual simulations, stem cell, genetic testing methods, non-invasive imaging techniques, which are very advanced, and no one can deny that, and we can use all these, as well as microdosing, to find out the more accurate and reliable to far greater degree of percentage accuracy than animal testing.
First of all, Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank you for being so accurate in your chairing of the meeting. Secondly, I would like to thank the previous speaker because that was just touching. I feel so much compassion for these animals that are in so much pain. You might have changed my mind. Except no. Okay, cuteness, like little cute kittens. Oh, so adorable. Cancer isn't pretty. Cancer is not pretty, and neither is dying from cancer, okay? And that is what we're arguing for. We are not only the side of philosophy, as my teammate has shown, we are also the side of science. You've told me that we can't measure the pain of those animals, and that's why we can't hurt them. Except you just gave me statistics telling me how much pain they're in when they die. Right, anyway. Where's my next point? Yeah. You told me thalidomide was only tested in mice and it's safe in mice. Yeah, it was safe in mice. Then they went back and tested on primates. It wasn't safe in primates. If there had been more animal testing, thalidomide would never have gone to market. There would never have been thousands of children born in extreme pain who would be in extreme pain for the rest of life because of the deformities caused. I'm getting there, sorry. My notes are a bit of a mess. You told me that animals react differently to humans and that's why it's not acceptable to test things on them. They do react slightly differently, they do. That's why we test on lots of different animals. For example, chickens have the same eye cones as us. So when you research for eyes, you use chickens. If you want to research kidneys, use mice, because that's the closest we are to them. It's all about science, ladies and gentlemen. Although they're trying to win you over by this cuteness and by saying that their methods are more scientific, I'd tell you that if they are more scientific, why aren't we using them? That's what I'd say, basically. We're not using them because they are 4 to 5 years away from being an adequate replacement. So back to the cuteness. That's my main argument. I have a big problem with people trying to win an argument because something's cute, right? What isn't cute is children dying. What isn't cute is your grand dying, right? It's not cute. It's not cute, right? So what I would ask you is, would you kill and torture a little kitten if it would cure cancer, right? Just think about that. Would you do it personally? If no, then I applaud you. You have insane moral standards, and you can be the next moral absolutist. Like, write a book, you can come lecture at uni, great. However, you have just cost quite a few people their lives. If you'd say yes to killing this one kitten, then you've lost your moral high ground. Your argument is just about numbers. And if you want some numbers, I'll give you some. Every year, 7.6 million people die of cancer. And in the past 40 years, cancer survival rates have doubled, and this is mainly due to drugs that have been brought into the market. And these drugs, as you've already told us, have all been tested on animals, which makes them more safe for human consumption. So here's your reality check. There is evil in the world, right? And we're adding a little bit to it. We don't try and stray away from this. Animal testing is horrible and cruel, and yeah, it's not great. But what's more evil is people dying, and yeah, I'm going to do that. People's lives are more important than animals. And if you want to tell me different, then go for it. But I think you've lost the debate on science, philosophy, and facts.
May I thank all six of the speakers here for coming and doing this. And now I'm going to open this up to the floor and for any questions you would like to have.
I have a,
Remember to speak loudly just in case the computer doesn't pick you up.
I have a point and a question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm very pro animal testing, but I have to correct something you said. Organ transplant surgery was not perfected on animals. Heartbreakingly, it was perfected on Jewish twins in Auschwitz by Mengele. My question to you,
My apologies, I did honestly.
if you plan on banning all forms of animal testing, how do you plan on developing drugs for animals themselves? For example, any illness in dogs would presumably have to be tested, the drugs for this would have to be tested on dogs. If you plan on banning all forms of animal research, or are you just going to sort of hope for the best?
Well, usually the same way as we would do for humans, so test it, give the alternatives, and then apply it where it is necessary.
What alternatives are you promoting if you're banning animal research? So you're going to try out dog medicine on humans?
No.
Okay,
The
what's
world-
your alternative then?
Both the World Health Organization and the Research for Defence Studies, which is the organisation that defends vivisection, agree that there are 450 different replacements to animal testing that can be used for both humans and animals.
I was just going to point out there was a process where you have to test on all the computer generated stuff, and then you actually have to test it. You can't put it on the computer generated everything and then just say, oh yeah, it'll probably work, let's put it on humans. You actually have to write it up.
At the moment, you say there's this process, there's not this process. At the moment, the only legal requirement for testing of drugs is on animals. Now, what we'd like to see is that process instituted pretty much as you say, where it first goes through computer trials, which GlaxoSmithKline support doing, and then onto individual cells, and then grown organs. Now, what I would point out is that the National Institute for Clinical Excellence approves what we're doing and gave its approval to that in 2011. So this process you're describing, animal testing, is not necessary and doesn't have to form part of that process. You do have to test it, but this next step of microdosing, it's like you said with the penicillin, if that being tested on animals in the way that friends on the other side proposing, still don't know what to call them, then we wouldn't have penicillin.
Can I come back to that actually? The only place penicillin is toxic is to guinea pigs, and that's at a 500 times dose of what you'd have to give to a human.
Okay.
So you're wrong again.
Just so your question.
I'd like to ask, would you take medication if it hadn't been tested on anything?
We're not proposing
No.
testing it on anything. What we're proposing is just taking out the animal
The
testing.
point
And
is,
yes,
the point is that there are other methods to find out if it works on humans, and then it gets to a point in all medicine, whether it's animal tested or not, where it's clinically tried on humans long before it's going to be given to you to see if it saves your life with cancer or whatever.
and these other methods are much more successful, as we said, with the 52% and 58% increase.
Okay, can we get your question?
Well, here's the interesting thing about your grown organs thing, right? we test them on animals, and as you say, sometimes, even though the animal's similar enough, it doesn't interact with humans. Often, we don't know why, and that's the problem with organs. We still do not understand how the human body works. We still don't understand how every little thing, every little enzyme interacts. You can't test it on the lungs and then the heart and say, well, it did the heart, but it did melt the lungs a bit, so we won't use that. There's no substitute for a complete human body.
Yes.
It is too complicated.
We agree, and an animal is not that substitute.
No, but it's a better model of how everything interacts. It's a better model of how everything interacts than a thing. Like, I'm coming from scientists.
Another drug on the list
I could
tested
cite
was on
Dr.
retinitis
Pettit,
pigmentosa.
recently
Cured your
Dr.
eyes.
Sarkar.
Fascinatingly, you can't test psychiatric drugs
Well,
on cells, obviously, because does a cell get depressed? No. In order to test psychiatric drugs, you've got to have tested it on an organism.
Well, to come back to your point there, you're saying, well, we're not talking about whether this thing does what it says in the tin. The major issue is testing for side effects. Because thalidomide, what they weren't testing as to whether it relieved morning sickness on the mice. They were testing for side effects, and it didn't show any. So that's what we're talking about testing for.
Can I ask, when you're talking about the testing of side effects, with particularly the types of stem cell research that you're talking about as being a valid replacement for animal testing, essentially a lot of it's totally irrelevant because actually the vast majority of drugs that have a medical side effect have a psychiatric side effect, and it's actually just as dangerous as a physical side effect. There's not enough made of how dangerous the psychiatric element of drugs are. Now, if you're testing just the liver, or even if you're testing like a liver which is attached to some other organs, you can't ever replicate complexity of a human or even an animal brain, because animal brains are just a lot closer to a human brain. I almost swore there. A lot closer to a human brain than just some organ sitting there or a computer simulation could ever be. And the psychiatric effects are just as dangerous, if not in some cases even more so. So actually, like, there's no viable alternative to recreate it in the same way an animal is, and that you can't win the debate on the basis that sometimes some side effects would be caught this way.
I agree with you.
And Alistair, Michael, you wanted to discuss something? You wanted to rebuttal?
Yeah, I wanted to do the bottle on the other team by the fact that they've pretty much consistently accused us of being wrong on facts and actually not employing facts at all. Whereas I'd actually assert that we have a lot more facts than you do, to be honest, and if you're going to base your entire argument on metaphorical emptying, please, then maybe you should join, as you said, this team. Right, let me give you some facts, okay? 200,000 medications have been released that have been tested on animals. The WHO, the World Health Organization, says that only 240 of them are actually essential and work properly. Only 2% of human illnesses are ever found in animals. According to a former head of development at GSK, all results, animal results plus human results agree only 5 to 25% of the time. 95% of the drugs tested on animals are discarded because either they're useless or they're dangerous to humans. 50 drugs tested on animals that cured cancer in animals actually caused it in humans. Doctors agree that 88% of experiments are misleading. That are pretty much always used in cancer research. The problem there is they never get calicomas, which is human cancer, which affects the membranes. They have sarcomas, which affects bone and connecting tissue, and therefore the results cannot compare. Results are also altered by bedding and diets. Correlates to 90% of the results. Sex differences contradict the results in that for cancer testing. That does not correspond to humans. Most medical experts say that data cannot be extrapolated safely. Lemon juice is deadly poison in animals. However, let's say arsenic, hemlock and bacillin are safe. And 88% of stillbirths are caused by drugs from animal testing from a study in Germany. You can check that one out. And 61% of birth defects are caused by these safe drugs. And by the way, there's been a 200% increase in birth defects since drugs were actually started tested on animals.
I'll agree with you, I do not have that many statistics. In fact, I have none because I was smart and didn't do any research. Honest, I'm a really clever guy. I'm a total idiot because I didn't do any research. But here's
your
what
team
I'll
accused
use.
us.
What I'll do instead is I'll use one of your statistics there. So I believe it was 220 or 240, I can't remember, the ones that the World Health Organization had said had made a significant difference. Okay, now that doesn't sound like a lot because it's a small number, it's only in the hundreds compared to the countless millions of animals that have died. But it's unfair to say that those drugs haven't made a significant impact, because we believe that the impact that those drugs, the ones that have made a significant difference, the ones that have saved like hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of lives, I think that they're the drugs that are important, they're the drugs that have resulted in animal testing. You said so, it was literally your words in the there haven't been that many of them, but the ones that have been important, the 240 of those have been really important. So I actually think that, like, yes, animal testing, not everyone passes. That's sort of a good thing because some have to fail because they're dangerous. That's like the point of it. But we think that those that pass can make a significant difference, can have a major impact, can save lives, and that's why we will oppose this motion. That's
all of these 200,000 medications passed animal testing and they were still used. Would you rather that just because the 240 are essential that we should still do 200,000? That's incredibly inaccurate.
Can you want to answer a question?
Sure. I have a question for the opposition. Could you explain to me again why one life of an animal is less worth than 1,000 lives? Because that's the oldest question in the world, right? Would you rather save one person and stop a train and because of that, or would you kill the person and let the train kill itself? And the other question is, you have never addressed the moral issues. You always talked about the scientific evidence, but what these guys actually said is that there is a problem within the moral issues, that you have to consider also animals who receive pain, animals who actually feel something, and that how could your measurements actually be something good? How can anything come good out of it if you produce it by torturing lives?
Okay, can I just reply to that?
Sure.
You said I didn't address philosophy behind it, but my whole speech was basically saying that if you are an absolutist, I don't agree.
No, your whole speech was, I have to disagree, your whole speech was about the point that if these guys think that one life is more worth than 1,000 lives, then they lost their moral high ground. That's what you basically said.
I said.
That's exactly what you said.
I said if you would not kill one person to save 1,000 lives, then you should write the next moral absolutist book, because that's fantastic. However, I'd have to disagree with you because I fundamentally disagrey that one life is more important than
why?
one person. Why? Because I'm not an absolutist, I'm a consequentialist. We just disagree philosophically.
I think
that's the one.
Right, okay, this comes down to that really old question that a lot of people use for the term campaigners and utilitarianism. When I was talking, the one at the train, the one that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like if you could change the train track that kills one person, or you leave it, you don't do an action that kills everyone on the train or that kills a lot of people. It depends how you ask it.
Going back to animals, by the way.
I will. That's good. Right, the simple answer to that is, and when I did that test, I would have killed the one person. I'm evil like that. Okay, let's deal with it. Our side are essentially evil, but we're evil for the greater good. We're like the bad guy in the Deathly Hallows. Okay, right? I can all the rest of Harry Potter. The point is,
the Nazi scientists were okay as well.
No, the point of this is that if you kill one person to save 1,000, that is for the greater value of human life, but also it's for the greater value of autonomy. Because the argument that's made by Kant and by people at
We're not going to get just one of them.
You keep on bringing up utilitarianism.
Michael.
Where 95% of drugs are discarded because they're dangerous to humans or unessential. How is that utilitarian?
Order.
Right. You keep saying that we've made this argument that 1,000 animal lives are worth more than a human life. I challenge you to point out the one time that any of us said that, because we didn't.
You can check
we specifically avoided making that argument. Now, the other thing that you said is, would you kill one kitten, horribly torture one kitten in order to cure cancer? Well, perhaps yes, except thousands of kittens have been tortured, and where's the cure for cancer?
But survival rate have doubled in the last 40 years. Doubled. Do you know what that means? It means
Except
twice
that's not
as many
due
people
to animal
are surviving.
Okay, that's due to research that's not animal testing. There's a difference between research and testing that you are not making.
Okay, Beth, you can go. We'll do you, and then is there one more question anyone wants to ask? Okay, we'll just do two.
I can.
So you brought up earlier being able to test some drugs on organs. And I was just wondering, we've obviously had it explained that stem cell research isn't quite at the stage where we can create organs. So where are you getting these from? Are you planning to take them out of the organ donation system and risk lives of people that will actually?
And we need organs for the people that need them.
I like that question.
I'll take it. If you're calm,
Right, I should be calm then.
If you
No, now at the moment we're at the stage where the organs that you're talking about, in terms of growing hearts, we're not at the stage now where we've got fully functioning human hearts independent of the rest of the body, and I completely agree with you there. And this obviously is an area of science that we're going, but we're talking about banning animal testing now, so you do have a very valid point. However, we have managed to grow human tissues incredibly successfully, and what the argument that we're making, which is backed up by research biologists in numerous universities across the world, is that testing it on various different kinds, testing medicine on various different kinds of human tissues in isolation, even not as an organism. Obviously, in isolation isn't as good as an organism, we're not at the stage of organism yet. Even testing it in isolation is better and more accurate more of the time than animal testing. And I refer you back to the statistic where when they did trials on human tissues, 52% success relative to 8% on animals.
Josh?
I'm gonna have to go back to that statistic that you quoted when you were saying effects. You haven't given me a control there. I think that's like you're saying that all these, only a few of the drugs succeed, right? That's fine. I think only a few of the drugs will succeed with any test. That's how it tends to work. Some don't, some do. The ones that succeed, well, the ones that succeed, they succeed. That's good. But not everything's going to succeed. Animal testing is one of the many hoops that you jump to refine it. And I think you'll be a bit dishonest there.
To add to that as well,
Right.
if something fails in animal
Can we have
testing,
a
it's
bottle,
obviously
please?
not
Can I-
Hello,
can I make-
he's asking us, not
Can
you.
I make a
Oh,
point?
Michael!
For instance, computer testing
After
has
being half an hour late, don't make your life
58%
that rude.
success rate in finding out which works,
And
which is a
40%
remarkably
failure
low
rate.
number, unfortunately, and science will increase that number. Animal testing is less than 10%, and in fact, you have a better chance of finding out whether a drug works on a human body than flipping a coin.
So why can't
That's
we
the
put them
hope.
together? Why can't we use both animal and computer testing and
Oh,
get an
because
even
it-
better?
Which is what we
Which
do
is what we
at
are
the
doing.
moment.
Exactly. like we
Except
just said.
many scientists don't want to use animal testing because it's unnecessary and unreliable.
Okay, last question from you, and then we'll be finished.
Sure, cool. I don't think you're being intellectually honest with where you hold your morals, right? So I'd like to test this, and it was pointed out by the audience that the heart transplant was successfully done in Auschwitz, right? Now that's clearly a positive thing that we now have successful heart transplants.
Be careful where you go with this.
Now there is this is going to be you're all going to hate this, but there was scientific progress made in Nazi times. Right?
Sit down, sit down.
I know Unit 731.
And
Is the Auschwitz thing true?
Yeah, so Michael.
No, can we not? Can we just let him finish the question?
the evidence we have the evidence that animal testing is providing us. We are making progress with medicine, right? So would you have changed the fact that would you have said we don't want heart transplants because of where they came from? We don't want this progress because of where they came from.
We're not rejecting progress. What we're doing is saying that when we move on and we advance medical science in future, we need to do it in a better way. Animal testing has been used for millennia, but really only came into its own in the 50s, when at that point it was the very height of our basically scientific knowledge, and it was the best way to test new medicines. Now, in 60 years, we've gone further, and what we're saying is that we should not be stuck with a 1950s technological and scientific mindset. We have better options now, and we should use
I'll
them.
give you the last word, and then we can conclude.
Okay. I mean, like, it's true. There are great things you do before you test on animals. You run computer simulations, you grow cells, you grow sometimes some organs to test things on. We completely
That's our
agree.
point.
We completely agree. However, they cannot replace animal testing for another 50 years, which is what we have been saying this whole debate.
Animal testing is
That's
wrong
wrong
92% of the time. So I would like to,
And
can we give a big round of applause for everyone who's doing it? Okay, I'm going to turn it off now. Thank you.
Say goodbye to YouTube after.
Bye, YouTube.
Good luck.